Let's take a look at cloud migration strategies. These are some of the emergent patterns from seeing thousands of companies going through this process. The very first one, and by the way, I should mention, these are called variations of name. Gartner has some naming, AWS has some others, and you might yet have seen another one. But in general, if you took a look at the description that I'm going to make, you should be able to recognize what names they're being given. The very first one is often called lift and shift. The other name that's a bit it's a bit derogatory is your mess for less, but it shouldn't be disregarded. It's an easy place to start. It is low risk and it has significant savings. And this can go a lot towards making your case within your organization. One of the often cited cases is that of GE Oil and Gas, who saved 30% by simply doing lift and shift. There's also some good resources because so many companies go through it, some migration tools by a number of cloud vendors. And if you're doing it by high touch, involving your organization in a lot of the work, this is also gain knowledge that you can then leverage for additional migrations or additional products or additional insights that you might get from having gone through this process. I should also mention that many times this level of use is called infrastructure as a service. And as no doubt you have heard, there's a lot of AAS followed by a first letter, like in this second slide, platform. The second pattern that I'll call out is one that's very similar to lift and shift, but you're making some change. And here you're looking at the low-hanging fruit. You're looking for those products or those packages that have very clean abstractions where you can replace a package or you can, behind an API, replace a product and making minor changes that perhaps give you big gains. An example that I point out here is Microsoft Internet Information Service for Nginx, which if you're paying for thousands of them, you might get a significant saving by going to something that is open source and it is does not require any payment. It is public domain, in other words, or an open source license that allows anybody to use it. The other thing that you might consider as well is something like a database, to go to a managed database so that you can offload some of those responsibilities to a product on the cloud. And so in general, as mentioned here in one of the bullets, you want to look at things that are cleanly wrapped behind an API so that making those changes is easy. So very similar to lift and shift, except you're catching some of those low-hanging fruit opportunities to be able to make some changes. The third one that I'll point out here is one where you're making a change for something equivalent. I gave the example there of a web server, but here we're thinking of something more significant. Imagine going from a CRM system to Salesforce or from an RDBMS to a NoSQL. Big changes, a lot of additional functionality. When it comes, for example, to storage in the cloud, there's a great deal of offerings to choose from. You could choose, in fact, a lot of variations of the type of storage that you want. And so in this case, you're looking at software as a service, something that you can pick up and replace some significant system that you have in your environment. And the next one, the fourth one, is really once you are in the cloud, once you have built those expertise, once you have your cloud center of excellence, once your business units have experience and you've gone through the process of not just changing minor components, low-hanging fruit, you've done major optimizations and replacements, now you can start to think in terms of cloud native computing. And this is where the big opportunities arise. Here you might consider going from PCs to VMs, from VMs to microservices, microservices to serverless. And as you might imagine, this is the most challenging strategy. It requires the most knowledge. It also requires you to understand cloud native architectures. But this gives you also a tremendous amount of agility. It also gives you access to a great deal of the open source that exists on these platforms. And you can really leverage this to become more agile, to become quicker, to perform or to align technology strategies with your business strategies. The next two that I'll mention, starting with retire, is not really a migration strategy, more of a recognition of some of the other resources in your infrastructure. And one of them is to retire. If you moved and you validated an application and you no longer need it, now you can turn it, you can spin it down, you can turn it off, and you no longer need to maintain it. The other is that there are some systems that will take years to migrate or that you may not want to migrate for some business reasons. And these are some that perhaps will always stay within your organization. And this leads me to this last slide. You do not have to start with cloud native. I mentioned lift and shift as being a very viable first step into the cloud. Many companies get stuck in the cloud native sense between cloud native goal and having very high performant Silicon Valley type talent. You do not have to do that. You can start with lift and shift. You can evolve your workforce and you can take advantage of all those years of inside processes, expertise that your employees already have. And as you can see here from my bullets, even if you were to look at the least performant lift and shift, you can see that even without changing anything else, by simply using different disks, that is, you change nothing about your application, but the disks that are being used are SSD storage, which is 2 to 5 times faster, you can gain performance. It is also, once you are in that environment, you do gain skills, you do have options for additional services that are then much more accessible. And I should also say that even cloud, very forward-looking, cutting-edge, cream of the crop in Silicon Valley companies take a long time before they can fully move into the cloud. In the case of Netflix, one of the gold standards for cloud leverage, it took them over 7 years, and they're pretty good at this. So don't be afraid to take first steps with simple approaches and leverage those wins and build your organization a step at a time.